Hello, friends. Welcome back to Reiki Crossroads and Connections, an ongoing conversation about forms of practice that can help us live lives that are grounded, that are spacious, that are connected, and that to help us to remember ourselves. My name is Michaela of Heartscapes Reiki. I'm really glad to have you with me here on this journey for today's conversation between a Reiki practitioner and somebody whose work is beautifully at the crossroads, not only of these energies of grounded, spacious, and connected, but also of my own personal journey. I'm really excited today to be talking about the practice of soul collage. I've shared about this practice a few times in previous videos. I'll link them down below. But soul collage is an intuitive collaging process that brings together our intuition, our imagination, and found images to give form and voice to some of the many parts of ourselves, get them into a physical form so that we can dialogue with them for deeper self-reflection, self-knowledge, insight, and in many cases, decision making in our lives. This is a practice that actually found me before Reiki found me. It's been with me a long time, and these two practices have really formed two of the strongest threads in the last almost couple of decades of my life that bring me to the work that I get to share with all of you. I came to SoulCollage when I was working in university and was asked to facilitate a series of rather difficult conversations among the university community that I was part of at the time. Conversations around some things that were happening that were very emotionally charged. They were very logistically challenging in terms of the structure of the college. And there was a lot of just heated feelings around. And there was a deep need for the community to come together around those things. And when I asked for some guidance on how I might facilitate such a charged conversation, the person who was advising me recommended that I use the practice of soul collage, a practice of intuitively going to images, giving those images voice that I would find out later come from our subconscious, and allow those images and that voice to speak to the deep places that each participant had, to get them into their own story rather than into accusation about each other, and to go to those deeper places. It was so effective to use that structure in that context that I was immediately hooked. I immediately purchased the book Soul Collage Evolving by Sina Frost and eventually got to train with her and others and never looked back. I've been a facilitator of Soul Collage for quite some time. And as I connected in with that community, there was a name that would keep coming up in conversations about people who were taking strong leadership in the Soul Collage community, really holding spaces for this practice to be shared, to be deepened, and to be part of people's lives. And that name was Anne Marie Bennett of Kaleidosoul. And I am so excited that today Anne Marie has agreed to be our guest in this conversation. So welcome, Anne Marie.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Yeah. And we've gotten to work together in a number of ways over the years. So I'm really excited to share that with other folks. We do some writing projects together. Anne Marie runs among other things, an online Soul Collage magazine that I get to do some writing for. And then you host a number of classes and such that I've gotten to guest teach with. So we have one coming up. As a preview, we will share about that. But before I get ahead of myself, I want to formally introduce you to the folks watching and listening by just sharing a little bit of your bio. And I love the voice that this bio is written in. And I'm gonna share it as a reflection back to you of how you speak about yourself. So Anne Marie Bennett is a woman, a wife, a writer, an artist, a sister, a stepmother, a grandmother. They call you Bella. A friend, a spiritual seeker, a lover of nature, a fan of autumn leaves and of winter hibernation. How lovely we're doing this conversation right in the midst of that season. You're a creator, a builder, and a connector of souls. I fully agree with that. You feel closest to spirit when near the ocean and when you're writing, creating art, teaching, and sharing the gift of soul collage with others through small groups and workshops. You're also a freelance writer and have written articles for local newspapers and magazines, and you've got a couple of books based on your experience with soul collage titled Through the Eyes of Soul Collage and Into the Heart of Soul Collage. We will put access to those publications down below if folks want to access them and dive into your vision of this practice. And all of that is so very juicy to be the foundation of this conversation today. And so where I'd love to start, kind of with all of that context, I'd love to just ground us into the simple question of how are you doing today on this beautiful late fall day?
Well, I was doing really great, and now I'm feeling even greater thanks to your beautiful introduction. Thank you for that. And I am feeling really pretty grounded and rooted today. I've just a couple days ago, or yesterday maybe, gotten back from 4 days up in Maine, where I rent this little condo all by myself, no husband, no cat, just me and the ocean. And that's like soul time for me, just calming and quieting. Did a lot of reading, I did some writing. And so I'm feeling really rested and relaxed and ready for this hibernation, so to speak. And how are you doing?
Yeah, I feel that you are very wise to have done that this time of year. It's always kind of at the back of my mind to like set aside that time to leave. I tend to be so home focused. It's hard for me to like cast my mind outward, but in those times when I take some time for myself, bring my creative things with me, it's always such a value. And this time of year is such an important time to do that. I'm definitely feeling the time speed up between these cultural markers that we call holidays and all that those things bring to us. Hosting a gathering tomorrow that I'm not at all ready for yet. So I'm definitely feeling the like quickening of the energy, which always feels very incongruent with the season, right? The season is slowing down, the world is slowing down. And at least in this kind of October to December time, like our culture has a certain form of speeding up. And that's always a little disorienting to me. Like I'm literally like feeling my body slowing down, going into hibernation while like the calendar is just filling up. So that is what it is. And it's one of the things that's so challenging, I think, about our modern culture where we don't align well with the seasons. And so having these practices that we can turn to consistently to get that sensation of grounding, that there's spaciousness, there's enough space inside of ourselves, even if the calendar is full. And of course, that sense of connection, which is really what the holidays are about, right? They should be. So really being able to drop back into those energies as the foundation, as the heart of why we would be filling our calendar so aggressively this time of year has been really, really powerful. So all the more reason to be in these practices. Yeah.
Yeah. I started doing this several years ago because we host Thanksgiving here for family, and I'm an introvert. And so it takes a lot out of me, and half the family stays overnight, and there's a lot of hostessing going on, and it's family, but it still takes a lot out of me. So I started doing it several years ago to kind of have a break after that, to be good to myself, to go back inward. So, and then I've just kept it up, and it's just 3 or 4 days does it for me. And now I feel myself, like you said, slowed down enough to not go racing into all the things that need to be done for the holidays, which it's really not as much as goes into Thanksgiving around here. So that's good.
Right. That's very wise. That's very wise. So from that foundation, thinking about your experience with this practice of soul collage and, not only as a practitioner, but as a leader in this community, I'd love for you to start us off by sharing a little bit about the threads that you followed into this work. There's many aspects of our life that come together, that weave together to create our passions, our work in the world, our purpose. And it's always really illuminating to me to notice which ones are kind of at the surface on a given day, right? What do we notice the most right now in this moment about what led you to do this work in the world. And so I'd love to ask you to share whatever's at the top for you.
Sure, sure. Thank you. Well, I found SoulCollage in 2004, right after my mother had passed. And I found it in a catalog of, I was signing up to go to the Art and Soul retreat out in Portland, Oregon. And there were all these classes like about watercolor and mixed media, collage, and all things I was really starting to claim my inner artist and wanting to get involved in. And one of the classes was SoulCollage. And I was immediately drawn to that word because it combined two of my threads, as you say, for my whole life. Like soul, I've always been a spiritual kind of person, grew up Catholic and then moved away from that. But still deep connection to the divine all through my life. And then collage, even when I was little, I was ripping up magazines and making collages, cards for friends. And I was like, well, there's one thing that this all puts together. I was just thrilled to find that. And so, and you mentioned Sina Frost, she wrote the book SoulCollage Evolving. That's the book. And so I flew out there and took all these wonderful artsy classes. And the last class that I took was SoulCollage. It was, I think it was a whole day workshop. And I was just fell in love immediately. The very first card I made is this one. And see the shiny light there. And then, so I just was drawn to the image of this woman dragging this girl and the girl looking around. And then I didn't know what I was doing really, but it felt like she was being conflicted. So I found an image of, I don't know, telephone wires or I don't know, these lines behind it were all jaggled. And then what you do with the cards when you make them is you ask the beings on the card, who are you? And then they speak in their own voice to you. And so with this card, the little girl was telling me that she was being dragged somewhere she didn't want to go. And the woman I was doing the exercise with, after we finished, she was journaling what I was saying. After I finished, she said, can I tell you what I see? And I said, yes. And she said, that little girl looks like she's being called by a different voice somewhere else. And I was like, whoa, that really spoke to me, because at the time I was working as a customer service representative in a theater near my home, a regional musical theater, which I loved. I'd had that job for 10 years. My background before that was education. I was a teacher. I was a consultant for a learning company. And then I met my husband in 95. Well, in 91, then we got married in 95, and he had 3 kids from his first marriage. And I was helping to bring them up, and it was not a pretty picture. It was really, really hard. And, but I was at the end of my theater journey there, I was feeling like I needed to do something else, but I wasn't really, because the theater was like a family to me, I hadn't really written it in my journal or even said it to myself, but she said it for me. And really, this card changed my whole trajectory of my path, because a couple months later, I resigned from my job at the theater and started my website, Kaleidosoul. And then I became a SoulCollage facilitator so that I could legitimately put SoulCollage out there in the world. And I actually got to train with Sina Frost. Here's a SoulCollage community card that I've made for her. She's a brilliant, fascinating, humble, delightful soul to be around. And so I took the training and became a facilitator. And that's really how I got into SoulCollage. I just couldn't not do it. And at the time, there were no facilitators out here on the East Coast. That was 2005. So we've come a long way now. There's like 5,000 facilitators all over the world now. And I think when I was trained, there were like maybe 200 or 300. I don't remember exactly, but it's evolved. Like the book says, SoulCollage has evolved, and so has my work with SoulCollage, and so has yours, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the way that that little snapshot, that glimpse into this really gave us a beautiful kind of introduction to the process, right? And what can occur when we engage this process. In a lot of ways, it's very simple, right? As most of the most effective practices for changing our lives often are. Um, we turn to found images, we pull whichever ones are compelling to us. We don't necessarily know why. It's usually better if we don't. And pull them together in a relatively small format, and then ask the simple question of who are you? And then letting yourself speak through the voice of this card, with the understanding that that voice is your own, but it's your own specifically of a particular part of you that has something to say, that has a message, that has a need, that has a gift, that has a point of direction for us, that perhaps we haven't been able to hear or respond to in any other way. Maybe we've heard it, we've been ignoring it. So it takes this different form, right? So I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about that structure, and about just kind of maybe some more insights that you've had or experiences you've had with the way that that particular structure has supported you and others that you work with.
Right, right. Well, the structure, as Sina has written about, and when she created the process over a number of years, she didn't just sit down one day and here it was to create cards that represent different aspects of your life or your journey, and to create wholeness about your deck. So like Michaela said, you can make cards just by, like I did with, where did I put it? Like I did with this one, like, oh, I just really was drawn to her, and then I put that behind them because it looked right. So you can make them intuitively like that, or you can make them intentionally. For instance, one of the suits that we create when we're creating a whole deck is the committee suit, which you just talked about being our inner parts of ourself, voice, the inner voices that we hear. And sometimes those come up intuitively, like this one. And sometimes we know the part already and we decide we're going to make a card for it. So for instance, I pulled some committee cards from my deck. So this is my inner businesswoman, which I really never knew I had until I started my business, Kaleidosoul. And my home body, the one who loves to be at home and has a hard time when she goes away. My inner creative self. That was a fun one. Lots and lots of pieces. Sometimes they have lots of pieces. Sometimes they just have one. And then we also add not just those bright and happy parts that make us happy and that make us feel good, but what we call the shadowed parts, the parts that we kind of don't like about ourselves. So here's my defensive part. And I actually made this card intuitively, not realizing that I even had a defensive part, but when it started to speak to me, that's what it was saying. So I found that to be very interesting. And then this is my Ethel, my inner critic. I believe we all probably have a critical voice inside our head that criticizes us, whether it's something we learned or whether it's something we internalized from society or friends or whatever. So this is Ethel, and the beauty of making a dark card like this is that I gave her a name and I gave her an image and I honored her, because sometimes she does have valuable things to say. She comes in really handy when I'm editing a book, and she comes in really handy, when I'm fixing my hair in the morning. She can be very helpful. And the best thing about honoring the critical part, or a part we don't like, or a part that we've shoved away, is that once that voice comes up again, well, for instance, for her, so once I hear her start nagging me about something, I'm like, Oh, that's Ethel. Okay, Ethel. And sometimes I might sit down and have a journaling conversation with her. I might pull out her card. Even just being aware that we have voices like that um, can really kind of calm them down.
Absolutely. I think that's such an important point. There's so much of what you just said that I want to emphasize, but starting there, and the idea of the shadowed aspects of ourself, which that concept is really valuable, right? To understand that there are parts of ourself that we might turn away from, that we might deny, we might feel ashamed of or afraid of. Um, or unwilling to express. Maybe it's that powerful part of ourself that feels scary to let out, and so we deny it. It's a concept that's very prominent in Jungian psychology, which is part of the foundation of the birth of SoulCollage, through Sina Frost's work as a psychotherapist. And I think it's one that gets a little misunderstood in a way that kind of oversimplifies into this binary of like, there's good parts of ourselves and there's bad parts of ourselves, and the shadow parts are bad and we have to fix them. And what you just said really helps to soften that and to allow us to have more nuance and understanding of that our shadowed parts are parts of ourself, and part of why they're shadow is that we're not wanting to look at them and we're not wanting to be in relationship with them. And that when we turn towards them and give them form and voice and maybe a name like Ethel, I love that you named it, and have a dialogue with them, right? And let that part of ourself express, like, why are you here? Why do you behave that way? Why do you say those things to me? Why do you govern my behavior in the way that you do? Oftentimes what we realize is that every single part of ourself is just really trying to keep us safe. Every part of ourself is doing its very best to work on behalf of the whole of us. And they have their own strategies, right? We have all these strategies to keep ourselves safe. So our inner critic, that part of ourself, its strategy is to emphasize everything that could go wrong, right? And say, hey, I want you to be safe and succeed. And so, do it this way. Don't do it that way. You're doing it wrong. Like, why are you like that? And that voice can get very harsh and very ugly. But it was so helpful to me, working with a card like that, to do exactly what you just said, form that relationship, like realize this is a part of me that's trying to do its best to keep me safe or to help me succeed. And we have a lot to learn from each other. And the other piece of, there are times when that part of ourself is actually the right one to bring forward, right? Because it's when we bring it into balance with the other parts of ourselves, that part actually has something to contribute that can be valuable. So I love that piece.
That my defensive part, when it speaks to me, it says there's a time to put up that defense. There's a time for that, and I'm helpful, and I can let you know when it's safe to bring it down and when you need to put it up. So it's all about putting it in balance and not leaving the mask and the shield up all the time.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm gonna just kind of mirror you.
You have some.
I'm gonna
Oh,
just
ooh,
just want to share my own inner critic card, and also to emphasize the other piece that you said, that sometimes we go in and create a card specifically with the intention of representing a part of ourselves that we want to get to know. So that was the case with my inner critic card. I was like, I need to befriend this part of myself. And so I went about making that card. More often, I'm making cards more intuitively the way that you said, often because the part of myself that needs to speak is not necessarily the part of myself that I want to make an image of. So this one is my very first card that I ever made, and this was intuitively done, and it was a real struggle the first time I ever sat down to make my own card for my own personal deck after having that experience with my students, because I really wanted to make a part of myself that was shiny and pretty and that I was proud of. I wanted to make my artist side or my goddess self or whatever, I don't know, something sparkly and pretty and shiny and that I could be happy with. And I tried for like 2 hours to put together images that felt good, that I wanted to put together, and the cards were just not coming together. And I thought, oh, I'm terrible at collaging. This is not working. But this frumpy little guy in this chair here, this drawing, this sketch drawing of this frumpy dude sitting in a chair, just kept coming to the top of my pile of images. And I was so annoyed by it because I hated it. And finally I was like, fine, you apparently are the one who wants to get made. And then this card came together. And when I sat down to dialogue with it the way that you just described, I found out that this was my imposter syndrome. And, the part of me that doesn't believe that I deserve what I have, professionally and personally, that, somehow thinks that I'm a fraud and that I'm pretending, and that eventually everybody's going to find out and I'm going to be in trouble, and probably everything is going to collapse and be awful. I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to lose everything, right? It's like that voice. And I was like, why is this here? Why are you here? And the very next day I had a budget meeting with my boss, and I was intending to ask for a larger budget. And this part of me, this imposter syndrome part of me, was absolutely convinced that I was going to ruin my life if I did this. And that I absolutely could not ask for a larger budget because I would be exposed as a fraud. And it was absolutely interfering with being able to do that work. And so I was so grateful that that was the voice that came forward, even though I fought it and I resisted it, right? It was exactly who I needed. And I, similar to you, just kind of sat down with that card and was like, look, we got some things to work out, but tomorrow I need you to stay home. Like, I need you to stay here and think about your life, okay? Because I got to go to this meeting. So yeah, just sharing a couple of these examples to help flesh out the system of SoulCollage. And you mentioned suits a moment ago. There are categories that the cards can be made in if one chooses to do that. That essentially, form a structure of like an oracle deck. And I wonder if you could share a little bit more about those suits. You mentioned the committee suit.
Yeah. Before I do that, I'm remembering my very favorite quote of Sina's from the book, and that is, in separating out all our parts, we become whole. And that I remembered that as soon as you were talking about that, and how I was sharing from the committee suit. But that's the epitome of wholeness, is separating out these parts and realizing that's just one part of me. That's not all of me. There are all these other parts too. So that was the committee suit, our inner parts, our inner voices. And then another kind of card we can make, we call community cards. And these are for people, sentient beings, Sina called them, animal pets from our lives, past or present, people who have died and passed on, we make cards for, because their voice still has presence in our lives. And we can also make cards for people that we haven't met. I don't think I didn't bring one of those, but I have many. So for instance, this is a card for my brother, John. My mom. So these were all made intentionally. I actually, on my mom's card, I have a piece of a letter that she wrote me, handwriting, and a piece of a handmade note card that she made. This card honors the grandfather that I never knew. But we have a strong connection for many, many reasons. So this was a very healing card for me to make, because he brought a lot of dysfunction into my mother's life. And it was very healing to make this card and to hear him speak to me instead of through her interpretation. And then here's a committee card I made for a priest in training who was a very big part of my life in my early 30s, before I've met my husband, before I came to SoulCollage and so on. I don't remember what year it was, but I went, on to a different church, and he went on to a different church and a different career, and we kind of lost track of each other. And then one day I found out he had died of a brain tumor, and he was only like 52 years old. And I had a really hard time processing that, because, he was very, very special to me. And so I remember the day I heard about it, I was out at a craft fair, And I came back home. I didn't even buy anything, which is unusual for me. I was so upset. I came up here to my room and I just went through my photo albums and got 2 pictures of him. And then I just went through my collection of images and put on some things that I felt like belonged there. So why there's a white lion or a sea lion, I don't really know. But then I sat down in my journal for like 20 minutes and asked him, who are you? What do you have to give me? What do you want me to remember? And it was just so moving. I was able to process that loss in a way that I did not know was possible. It brought so much healing to my heart to be able to hear his voice again. And so, and you can also make cards for people we don't know. Like I have a card in my deck for John Denver, whose music has really touched me. Poets, artists. I recently made a card for Matthew Perry because his work over the years touched me in many ways. And I had a hard time processing that loss too. Poets, artists that have moved you. And the beautiful thing about this is once you've created all these cards, you do readings where you draw cards randomly and they help you, like you said at the beginning, make decisions. They help you clarify goals. They help you answer questions about your life. And so it's such a thrill when I draw one of these cards and they help me, even though all 3 of these people are dead except for my brother. But anyway, I have plenty of cards for friends and other relatives and so on. And that, did you want to talk about community?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just kind of reflect back that there's such poignancy to the community suit, and it opens up, as you say, avenues for connection, for healing, for grounding, for spaciousness that can be really challenging when the person has passed on, or maybe the person is still alive but is not in our life anymore. You know, we've had really challenging experiences with them. It's a suit that we want to put a lot of tenderness around, because the real life people who have influenced us, there's so much complexity to those relationships. Often that influence has many aspects to it, some of which can be really challenging. And to be able to have a space where we can process those things, be in honest dialogue with those people, but in a safe and private way, right? Oftentimes, people who work, who support people through grief and through, healing trauma and relationships that have broken, when we can't be in that healing process with that person, we'll offer ways to have this kind of dialogue with that person who isn't physically present. And this is just such a tangible way to do that, right? To literally make an image of them that has the potential to express many aspects of what that relationship meant to us. And then from there, because the card is not just about them, it's about the way that that person influenced us. So what is the part of me that is what it is, that behaves the way it does, that thinks the way it does, that is shaped the way it is because of that relationship, right? And what does that part of me need and have to say? And then, that piece of memorializing, when Sinead O'Connor died recently, who had been on my list of someone to make a card for a long time, it was so, unfortunately, it sometimes is when a person has passed that we realize the impact that they've had on us. And, her work and her life just profound impact on my life. And there was this regret, even though it's like I never had the opportunity to meet her, there was still this regret of never having expressed that while she was alive in some way. It was a weird feeling. And so making a card for her was really, it was essential. It was like I dropped everything and came up here to the studio and like spent the rest of the day just in that process. So yeah, I appreciate you bringing kind of both of those aspects forward, the people we know and then the people that are in our field that influence us, even if we'll never get to have a conversation with them.
Right. And pets too. I didn't pull any of those cards, but I've got a card for all of the cats and one dog who have influenced my life and changed my life in many different ways through their beingness. And I've made cards for them while they were alive, but also after they died, and to hear their voice after they died, very, very special. Very, very, very special.
Absolutely.
Another suit that we make cards for is called the council suit, and these are archetypal energies. So I have a couple here. Let's see. I honor the archetypal energies of the seasons. I have one for each season. This is the energy of spring, newness, beginnings, and the archetype, whoop, come over there, peaceful warrior.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't have a warrior card, but this one came to me as peaceful warrior. Also, I mean, I made the spring card intentionally. This one just came to me, and when she started speaking to me, that's what she was saying.
Yeah.
She was guarding the young ones, and peaceful warrior.
Yeah.
Survivor, not the part of me that survived breast cancer twice, but the energy of surviving that people all throughout history and time and cultures and place know. So I say capital S, survivor.
Yes.
Surviving. And this is my hermit card, which is the energy of hermit, the energy of introversion or going by myself. Not the inner part of me that's an introvert. I have those too, but just the universal energy of hermit. Yeah. Council.
Yeah. I love this distinction that you're making. It's so important that there is the part of me that is a certain way. And then there's the energy of that way in the world that touches anybody. And the idea of archetypes is so powerful, again, coming through, Jungian psychology, that, the idea that there are forms in the human psyche that are universal, that show up again and again in human culture, that show up in our mythology, in our storytelling, in our, art, but also in our personalities, in the way that a person will present themselves. And that we're in relationship with them. We're in relationship with the whole community of these energies, but at different people and at different points in our life will have particularly strong relationships with particular archetypes. There's usually a handful of them that are like, the way I think about it is active in our life. And that activity, often is a form of inspiration. It's part of how we shape our imagination and our sense of identity and self and purpose. Often our jobs will have something to do, or our hobbies, the things that we're really passionate about, that we devote ourselves to, will have some reflection in archetypal forms. And so there's that bigger energy. I like that you capitalize it. And then there's the part of ourself that is that thing. And that those are two separate cards. Right? That's a committee card and a council card that have a relationship with each other. But I love that the structure of SoulCollage allows us to distinguish those things, because the archetype of the artist, for example, which is one that's alive in my life, and my identity as an artist might have different things to say and to do. And when that archetype of the artist is out of balance in my life, which Sina talks about, our shadows and the way that things can become shadowy, often is about there being too much of the thing or not enough of the thing. So right now we're heading towards Christmas. Usually I'm crafting my heart out, making Christmas presents. My connection with artist archetype is really small right now. Like there's not enough of it in my life right now to feel inspired to do the thing I'm normally doing, which is it's kind of concerning me right now. So it's on my mind to pull that card forward, and the one that represents the archetype and the one that represents me, to see, if there's something there that I should be paying attention to. It might be that part of myself is just tired and doesn't want to work this season. That might be fine, right? Sometimes there's too much of it. Sometimes I get completely obsessed with making things, with crafting, and I can't focus on anything else. And then I'm letting other commitments down, and I'm not, completing things because I'm hyper focused on that part of myself. So super helpful to have those images that we can turn to help understand what's going on when we feel out of balance, or when we just want to connect with that part of ourselves. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I gotta go look at my artist card too.
Yeah.
And then the fourth suit bringing us full circle is the Animal Companions suit, which Sina based this suit, her teaching of this suit, on this book, The Personal Totem Pole by Stephen Gallegos. So I highly recommended that, as well as Sina's book, SoulCollage Evolving. But we make cards to honor animal energies, not the animal pets, like my cat Louis and my cat Seymour, but the larger energy, capital letter energy of animal energy. And the way Sina teaches it, the animal companions belong to different chakra energies in the body, but you can follow that philosophy or not. But I just have a couple here. This is my root chakra wolf, who keeps me grounded as long as I remember to be in dialogue with him. So it's capital W, wolf, capital W. And let's see, lion and lioness. I've got double energy in my throat chakra. My self-expression energy is doubled. It used to be lion, and then I don't know, one time I made a lioness card, and then they kind of came together. And my crown chakra connection to the world and the divine and others is dragonfly, capital D, dragonfly.
That's beautiful.
So those are some of those cards. And then also, there are some cards that I've made that I don't know what they are until years later. This is one of them I made many years ago. And I think it was 3 or 4 years later at a retreat I was leading, I actually sat down with her, and she was saying, I am the one who has come a long way through the winter. And she was talking about the winter of all my cancer journeys and is now standing in the blossoming good health. So that took a while for her to speak, or for her to come forward. And then this is one I recently made just a couple months ago that, I don't know, I just love her so much, but I haven't worked with her and I'm not really sure what she's saying. So it's not like every card you make, you sit down immediately. Well, I don't anyway. Some people might. It's some cards. I mean, I have maybe 10 or 20 cards in my deck that I haven't worked with yet, that I'm not sure what they are. But I do these short readings a couple of times a week, where I just draw a couple of cards randomly and let them, who are you and what do you have to say to me today? And so that's probably how this one came up. She came up in one of those.
Yeah.
So you kind of draw them randomly.
Yeah, I can really relate to that. I definitely have cards that have not yet revealed exactly who they are. When they come up in readings, they have wisdom to share, but it's still there's a few that are still a little ambiguous as to what part of me is speaking. And there's value in that, right? And recognizing that there's parts that aren't ready to show themselves or tell the whole story, that quite possibly, or very much definitely, we'll never know exactly all of the parts of us, because how many parts are there of us, right? It feels almost infinite when we really start to pay attention to that idea. And one of the things that's really cool about using with a visual form like this, and I really appreciate the emphasis that Sina always brought, and that I just see emphasized in the SoulCollage community. This isn't about making art, right? There doesn't have to be a part of ourself that says, oh, I'm not an artist, I can't do this. Right? It is not about making art, right? The finished product might be something that we really enjoy looking at. It might not. The point is not to create a piece of art that is pleasing to ourselves or to others. The point is to give voice and form to a part of ourselves. And when we do that over and over again in this visual form, we can start to see patterns, and we can start to see repeated images, and we can start to see the way that our interior landscape looks, right? What's the color palette of that landscape, right? What are the high points and the low points? And there was just something I noticed. I wonder if you would lift up that card again, the one that you just had up with the that spoke to your cancer journey.
Oh yeah.
That one. So when you're holding that card up, right, I don't know if you can see this, but you've got this card that has this beautiful white kind of and gray background, and then this vibrant, red, orange, yellow, blue, almost rainbow. And over your other shoulder, there's a white door with a rainbow hanging on it. And
Yes.
those two images are so
Oh,
beautifully like
yeah, they do. Yeah.
mirrored right now in the screen.
That
And
is really beautiful. Yeah, I like that.
yeah, and it's helped. I've noticed things like that where some part of my interior gets expressed on the card, and then I see the way in which I've already been uh, projecting that or recreating that part of myself in my home or in my space. So that was just something that I
Thank you.
um,
Thank you. I think I want to add too, I think it takes a certain amount of self-trust. I know I have learned self-trust through this. I'd say when I first started, I really didn't have a lot of self-trust, but like, for instance, the card you shared, your liar, your imposter self, it took a lot of self-trust for you to put that guy on that card, I think. And I think as we're looking through images and pulling the ones that are drawn to us, we just have to we trust ourselves that we know what we're doing and that it will be revealed eventually, even if not right away.
and that's kind of a reciprocal thing, right? It does require a certain amount of self-trust, or at least willingness to do something that feels a little risky or different or weird, especially the first time we do it. That's something that, I'm sure you can relate as a facilitator. We sometimes have to put some structure around for people, right? We sometimes will work with people who have resistance to even doing this kind of process, which is totally fine. It's not for everybody, but I feel strongly that anybody can do this, even if ultimately it's not the right modality for them to do this kind of self-reflective work. But anybody can do it. But even with that sense of resistance, if we overcome that, it takes that self-trust and that resilience. On the other side of that, it helps to build those qualities in us, because if we give ourselves to it, and if we approach it with any kind of openness and honesty at all, even if we have skepticism, even if we have resistance, this process works phenomenally well, even when there's resistance. And when we see that, when we allow ourselves to speak from the card, even if it feels totally weird to do that, even if it feels completely outside of our baseline to speak as if we are this picture that we just made, right? Sometimes I have to gently redirect people. No, don't talk about the card. Talk as if you are the card. If we can step into that at all, our subconscious, parts of our subconscious, want to communicate and will do it. And when that happens, right, it reinforces that sense of trust and that sense of being willing to take the risk. There's this like miraculous revelation that can happen when we work with this process that is really it's probably the place where that kind of experience has shown up the most strongly for me. Having worked with a lot of different modalities, a lot of different teachers, a lot of different spaces where we're invited to, work with our interior landscape in this way. This process has been the most powerful for me in building that sense of self. I don't know if that's been true for you.
I agree. Yes, definitely. Yes, I feel like when I first came to this, I was so scattered from everything that had happened the previous several years with the step family, all kinds of drama, family drama that I was not used to. Because I grew up in a normal, stable kind of family, and the step family I stepped into was not that way. So yeah, I was really like scattered completely, and bringing all these parts together just made such a huge difference. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's reflected in that quote that you shared about wholeness, right?
Yeah.
And about,
Yeah.
again, kind of thinking about the intersections between this practice and the system of Reiki. When I started practicing Reiki, when I started learning the system from the perspective of its Japanese origins, which is a very different system than the Western form I'd originally learned and practiced for several years, I started, hearing these perspectives that, Reiki is about remembering our whole self, that about, remembering the wholeness of our true self, that healing is about integrating ourself, right? Our body, our mind, our breath is the way that we would think about it in Reiki. And that immediately resonated and struck a bell because it's exactly what SoulCollage is inviting us to do, all right? To integrate these many parts of ourself by acknowledging them, giving them voice and form, and bringing them together. And this idea of the one and the many, and the many and the one, which Sina talks about at length and is part of the, part of the landscape, part of the ethos and the mindset of SoulCollage, is this idea that, we are a single person, we are a sovereign being, a one being, that is made up of many, many parts. And at the same time, we are a part of a collective whole, that we are a point on a web of life that is interconnected. And so this dance between our own sovereignty and wholeness and sense of self, and the many, many, many parts that come together to make that wholeness, and then the fact that we are ourselves a part of a larger whole, is not only like so resonant with the way that the system of Reiki understands the world, again, from its Japanese origins, but has just felt so true. It's like, I've worked with a lot of different systems of belief. You mentioned being raised Catholic. I was raised atheist. I was like, my parents were like, go figure it out. I don't know what to tell you. Like, there's, go see what works for you. And, there's a lot of freedom in that, but there was also like no structure. And so I've encountered a lot of different systems of belief. And, when you're in that seeker mindset that you identified as earlier, trying different things, some things are just not going to feel true. It's like, it just doesn't feel like that's true. Like that's how this works, and this area of thought, is just like lands for me as like, yeah, I can put my beliefs and my worldview around this. I'm not, I can't say that this is true, capital T, right? But it feels true to me. So yeah, those connections between the idea of integrating our parts, and that wholeness and healing are one and the same, and that there are structures that can help us get there, has been really powerful.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So you mentioned the companion suits as you were walking us through that structure of this oracle deck. I often call SoulCollage the oracle of you. You are creating a deck of cards that's organized into 3 suits, with also some transpersonal cards that we haven't talked about yet. And that gives you a structure, but the meaning that is made from those cards comes from you. It doesn't come from an external oracle. Although, of course, there's influence from the world, of course, but it's an internal oracle. One of those suits being the companion suit. And I wanted to circle back to that for 2 reasons. One, because you are leading a really powerful deep dive into the companion suit over several months, starting in early next year. And I get to be a guest teacher for that class. And we're going to, with a variety of different teachers, really deep dive into the potential of this suit in a way that I'm really excited about. You talked about that suit bringing together like the energies of our body, which can be understood through the chakra system, can be understood in many other ways. And then the idea of animal energies as kind of representing energy of nature, and the embodiment of the natural elements that are inside of us. And that's such a rich territory for exploration. I'm so excited about it. For me, the companion suit has always been about the wisdom of our body, and the knowledge and the emotional energy and the mental energy that is held in our physical body, and the way that is in relationship with the natural world. So I'm really excited about that. And I wanted to, in a moment, just have you say, what's on your heart about that experience that's coming up, by way of invitation. But to also emphasize that with any of these suits, the invitation is to make them our own. That SoulCollage does not represent or require any specific spiritual or religious belief, or any at all. That it is a flexible system. It only asks us to believe that there are many parts of our self that we don't have conscious access to all the time, that might have some value in our life, and a willingness to explore that. And so while that suit, the companion suit, is organized in its original form around the chakra system, which is embedded in a particular spiritual tradition from a particular part of the world, and the idea of animal energies, which, an animistic kind of idea that is not going to resonate for all people. There are ways to work with the companion suit that do not have to be tied to any of those traditions. And there's a lot of flexibility there. So just wanted to name that if anybody's like, I don't know if that's for me. And so, I would imagine that the richness of this suit is part of what inspired you to create this experience that is going to be starting next year. So I'd love for you to tell us a little bit more about that.
Yes, definitely. Thank you. And thank you for agreeing to be one of our facilitators. We have 6 facilitators. There's 1 3-hour Zoom a month from January to June. And then in July, we'll have a panel discussion and questions and answers and some exercises to kind of tie it all together. But the reason I chose this, I've been doing these series for several years, but I've kind of put this one off. But I feel comfortable now with the facilitators I have lined up to help teach this or help us experience. It's not really teaching, is because for me, when I first started SoulCollage, this was the hardest one for me to grasp. And I know from facilitating many workshops over many years that a lot of people feel the same way about this workshop, about this suit. Companion animals and how they work with the body and what is that all about. And so each facilitator over the course of 6 months will be presenting a different aspect of this suit and different ways that we actually will be working with the energies of this suit, whether you have cards for them or not. There will be guided imagery where you may be able to meet one of your animal companions. There are many ways to meet your animal companions. One of them is guided imagery. I have a guided imagery I've written. Sina has one. I believe every facilitator has one too, who's going to be facilitating this series. They can come to us in dreams. They can come to us just when we're sifting through images, and one particular animal image will just be jumping out at us. We might discover our animal companions just because we've had an affinity with a certain animal. Who knows why? Over many, many years. I know my good friend Janice, who doesn't do SoulCollage, since I've known her 20 or 30 years, has just been in love with leopards. And who knows why? Who knows why? I don't know why. She doesn't know why, but she's just drawn to that animal energy. And so you might have that same experience. There might be an animal that is always, always called to you. When I was very little, 3 or 4 or 5 years old, I started collecting cat statues and cat pictures and cat images. And why I didn't know. I didn't get a cat until I was 7 or 8 years old, like a real live one. But that's an animal that has always had an affinity for me. So my capital C cat energy lives in my heart. That's my heart chakra companion animal. But it's taken many years to get to that place where I can name that. So it takes time and patience. And I think that the series is going to be a lot of fun also for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love my experience with the companion suit has been a lot of kind of playfulness and mystery. I also feel very closely identified with cats and mountain lion in particular. So I've got one over my shoulder all the time. She's tattooed on my thigh, it's very prominent. I fully expected lion energy to show up in my heart or somewhere else, when going through this process of seeking, what are the animal energies or metaphors, right? We can also think about them metaphorically. If the idea of animal energies in the world doesn't resonate. But when I started going through that process, fully expected lion energy to show up. It did not. Lion energy is an archetype that is alive in my life, but it wasn't governing these parts of my body, which was super interesting. And I was luckily open to, I wasn't disappointed about that. But it's a really playful, imaginative way of thinking about, reflecting, how do I show up in the world and how am I related to the world? And what am I paying attention to and not paying attention to? And I think the very first companion card that I made was in my facilitator training with Sina and Maria Bruna. And, I worked with the heart energy because, of course, I always just, wanted to go to the juiciest place first. That's,
Right.
tends to go where my mind is. And I was very surprised what came forward. I'm going to share it with you. So
Mm.
the energy that was governing my heart was this tiny, delicate butterfly.
Mm.
And the landscape that this butterfly was revealed inside of was a desert on the edge of an ocean. And this butterfly was traversing between the two, crossing this, vast expanse of desert to arrive at the vast expanse of ocean, and then, kind of navigating between these two very different seeming landscapes. And the narrative that accompanied that was the idea of strength within vulnerability and vulnerability within strength. And the kind of biological reality that there are butterflies like the monarch that traverse great distances with their tiny, delicate vulnerability. And there was something very compelling about that, so much so that this image that I created, very long time ago, over a decade ago, became the representation of my purpose. The reason that my business is called Heartscapes is because this is the landscape of my heart. All right. And that what I wanted to do with this business was to facilitate people taking a journey inside.
Mm.
And this image became my logo. And it still is in a different form.
Kayla,
So
I love that.
go ahead.
I love that. I love that story. I love that image. It just
Yeah.
makes my heart happy looking at that butterfly flying through the desert, through
Yeah.
the water, through the dry to the water.
Yeah, and there's so much richness there. I mean, one of the things, again, that working with this practice, not just with myself, but with, hundreds of people now at this point, and this maybe is true for you, is that we get to witness the depth of our own imagination and the imaginative capacity of people and the way in which our imagination is a real thing. It's not I think that it's one of these words that I want to reclaim, right? Imagination, the imaginal, fantasy. These are not like unreal things, right? The things that we feel in our imagination that we can't see out in the world are real, right? They have a depth of reality to them because they exist in this interaction between our interior space and the exterior world. And so when we allow our imagination and our intuition to give us an image of something about ourselves, there's often so much playfulness in it and so much depth. And so yeah, if we can open to that and be willing to just accept whatever comes, right? Because this can be part of the hardest part of this process is to dial down that critic, dial down, like, for people who identify as artists, this can be a really challenging process. It was for me because we want to control the image. We want to say, I want to create this image and let me go find the pictures and put it together as if I'm making a painting, right? But that's not what this is. This isn't about controlling the outcome. This is about opening up to the mystery and letting that mystery come through and show us something that we couldn't otherwise see. And so it's such a worthwhile endeavor. And I really look forward to diving into companions with you and with the other facilitators. This is an online experience. So folks at home, if you are intrigued by this idea, we will of course put links below for how you can learn more about this journey with the companion suit and join if you are so inspired. Do people have to have experience with SoulCollage to join this journey?
No, I don't think so. But when you do sign up, you're going to get in your confirmation email, you're going to get a link to a very simple, basic 3-part email course that I've put together on the companion suit to just give you a little bit of background. And also, if you just go to kaleidosoul.com, my homepage, on the upper left, on the upper right hand side, there's a link to a SoulCollage Basics ebook that's like 27 pages long that I've put together to give you some background. That's yeah. I think
That's cool.
to be that experienced. And one of
That's so
the really
helpful.
cool things about these series that we do is that a couple of times during each one, you'll have a chance to go into breakout rooms with other people and share whatever the facilitator has suggested that you share cards, share whatever you journaled. It's totally optional. You don't have to go into the breakout rooms, but people find that sense of community, even though it's on a flat screen, really, really helpful to the journey, to the creative journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I've found that to be true in the past offerings. And yeah, so it's, I mean, that's so generous to be able to offer these ways that people can step into this world if they've never been inside of it before. And, you know, on the one hand, this is a deep dive that if you have experience with Soul Collage is going to really support deepening that practice. And if you have zero experience with Soul Collage, there are some ways in which you can familiarize yourself, right? Step into this world so that the language is somewhat familiar, the concept and the structure is familiar enough. Maybe you can play around with making cards or maybe not, so that you can step onto this journey with enough provisions, enough context that you can be along and then learn from the community, right? Be in a community of learning with people with all different levels of experience with this, which is sometimes the most dynamic learning communities when you've got folks that are entering from different places. So yeah, I'm really excited about it. Anne Marie, tell us a little bit, just a couple more things that people can expect from interacting with you. What else might people be able to receive when they step into Kaleidosoul?
On Kaleidosoul, there's a menu across the board, and then there's a whole bunch of different menus at the bottom. So you can try playing around and clicking on whatever appeals to you. At the bottom, there's some vertical menus, and there's one page you can click on for each of the suits to learn a little bit more and to see some more examples. There's a section on doing the exercise I talked about, like, who are you? What do you have to give me? There's an exercise, there's a page that talks you through all of that. There's one on readings. I can't remember what else. So there's a section on working with different things that might come up in your life, like a cancer journey or working with difficult situations and so on. So just kind of just go and explore, and do download the free ebook. I think a lot of people have found that really helpful as a basic, very basic introduction.
Beautiful. And then when people are on your email list, you have a quarterly magazine that goes out. The next one that will be going out, I believe, will have an article written by me
Yeah,
about a
monthly. It's
connection.
monthly. It's
Um,
monthly. Yes, it's
yeah, oh,
monthly.
it's monthly.
Yep.
That's right. It is.
You
I just
write quarterly.
work quarterly. That's right.
Right.
That's what is in my head. And then you offer a wide range of classes that people can dip into. And so Kaleidosoul is a membership structure. So folks, if you join as a member of Kaleidosoul, you have access to just a wealth of experiences, both pre-recorded online and also live classes that are presented from community members who have a lot of experience in this world. So
And it's only $44 a year. And this month, because it's holiday month and we're doing some saving packages, it's $34, but the coupon code. But you'll see the coupon code if you sign up for the email list and get the emails. But or you can just email me and I will give it to you. Since I tell it to you right now, but I can't remember what it is.
no worries. We'll make sure all of that information is down below.
All right, thank you.
Oh goodness, we could talk all day
I
about
know.
this. There's so many other things that are in the back of my mind that I'd love to talk about, but we are at the end of our time boundary, and so I want to just close with one more question, which is, these days, maybe in this very moment, what is something that is bringing you joy?
Well, I knew you were going to ask me that, so it's hard to pick one, but I'm just really looking forward to Sunday. My husband and I are taking one of our granddaughters and her best friend to see Matilda at the Seacoast Repertory Theater in New Hampshire, which is about 45 minutes from here. And she's a delight. Her name is Felicity. We call her Lissy, and she always brings us joy and happiness. So I'm really looking forward to spending that time with her and my husband and her friend.
No, nice. Yeah, my kiddo and I like to do community theater a lot too. So I love that. Matilda's such a good one.
Are you?
I am feeling a lot of joy in this moment of the season. I know it's going to turn, maybe a little colder and wetter than I like, in a little while here. But right now, it is this delicious combination of, the temperatures coming down from our like ridiculously hot summer. And, as much as we get fall colors here in Central California, they're popping out. And so I'm able to be outside and be comfortable. I don't do well in the heat, so the cool down is very welcome. And just being able to be out in my garden and observe those seasons changing, observe the changes in the animals, the way that the energy shifts towards this like provisioning energy and then this like preparing to rest energy, I find a lot of joy in. So that's what's up for me right now as I look out the window and there's these beautiful clouds in the sky and it's making me happy.
Do your leaves change?
Some, yeah, we have a lot of evergreen trees that don't. We have a lot of trees that they just drop their leaves without any fanfare. But there's enough. Like I have a crepe myrtle right outside my window. There's a lot of crepe myrtles in town because they do well in our climate. And they get a really lovely dark red. And there's a ginkgo over there that's bright yellow right now. So there's enough to like give you that feeling. It's nothing like, East Coast.
Right.
You know,
Ours are all bare now, but they were
yeah.
pretty while ago, last month.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, beautiful. All right. Well, thank you so much, Anne Marie, for joining me for this conversation, for inviting me into your world as a guest facilitator and writer. It is one of my favorite things that I get to do in my work. And for those of you listening at home, I hope that something in this conversation has piqued your interest, your excitement, that has spoken to you in some way. I'd love to hear what came up for you as you listen to this conversation. Do you have experience with SoulCollage or something similar, some other form of intuitive collaging that has been meaningful for you? I'd love to learn about your experiences. And we offer this to you as something to bring with you so that as you go throughout your day, you feel deeply provisioned for whatever comes your way. Thanks so much for joining us. Until next time, we love you.
Thank
Goodbye.
you, Sheila. Thank you.
Mhm.